Is it true that Fabiano Caruana, the world's leading expert of the Rossolimo system with the white pieces, could perhaps be wrong in his evaluation of this system? In case you're wondering what I'm referring to, there was a recent podcast here on C Squared where he shared that black should be objectively fine against the Rossolimo. However, my own analysis suggests that this position is indeed slightly better for white with correct play, and in this training video I'm going to share with you why I believe that to be the case, and this will also give an opportunity to update my course Attacking the Sicilian, for which I created back in late 2021, and sharing some of the new ideas and how the theory has changed a little bit since then. And we are going to cover a lot of black's options like the main line of g6, but also things like e6, d6, the modern main line of e5, and also the move of knight f6, which Caruana himself was playing quite a bit in the 2024 FIDE candidates, which those who've been following the channel for a while may recall that I did recap the candidates, every round of the candidates this year, in fact, on this channel. You're always welcome to check that out after this training. But yeah, I think one reason that bishop b5 is, frankly, probably just a better move than the pure open Sicilian is, well, for one thing, the Sveshnikov is just very hard to, I think, prove an objective advantage against. But also, bishop b5 is just a lot more flexible. You know, you are not just limited to ideas of, let's say, castling c3 and d4 and just playing in the center, but you also have the option to double their pawns at different moments, where bishop takes c6 and get a bit more of a strategic battle. And it's definitely that flexibility that makes things quite difficult for black. Now, if we compare with why I think the version with bishop b5 after d6 is a little bit less effective, well, the difference here is that the move knight to d7 is now available, which is sort of avoiding the problems with double pawns that sometimes come up in the Rossolimo. And there are certainly different things that can be tried here. For example, I suggested this very interesting shortcut of bishop a4, anticipating the idea of a6 and b5 in my aforementioned course, Attacking the Sicilian, which is a system actually that Nakamura also has done very well with in on chess.com, in fact, winning nearly all of his games, as have I. But yeah, that's something that we're not going to be covering in this this training. But just to let you know, like, why I think that, you know, the version with knight c6, bishop b5 is slightly better, and, you know, the version with d6 is only going to be equal if black plays correctly. And by the way, if you are enjoying the training so far, do make sure to leave a like and also to consider subscribing. Well, the advantage of subscribing, and especially when you also tap on that notification bell and set notifications to all, is that you're going to be notified each time a new training of mine is released here. So it's going to ensure that you don't miss out on any really important training videos that will make a big difference to your play as such. In terms of the scheduling, right now I'm just doing a training video every couple of days. Sometimes quite a lengthy one, sometimes something a little bit more brief. You know, I like to mix up a little bit for you guys. But yeah, just to really help you as much for your chess, whatever your situation may be. Anyway, let's see how things have evolved a little bit in the g6 line. And in this one, I've actually done a bit of analysis on quite a few different approaches, but I'm just going to kind of give you guys the very short summarized version, as it were. I'm just sharing my conclusions. So basically, after castles and bishop g7, the line that I recommended previously in Attacking the Sicilian was the move c3, which was the main line back then. And my idea was basically to play into this line with like d4, d5, and, you know, sort of make the point that white just has a much more flexible structure, and that the bishop is a bit stuck in a position like this. And it's still, I think, a pretty good line to play. I still very much stand by the recommendation, but I do think that the move of e5 is a better one for black. And what I kind of found, without going sort of too deeply, is I do think that black is objectively fine in this position here, where bishop b6 might look a bit annoying, but black can sort of play around the piece without too many massive problems. Again, my mouse is a little bit wonky right now, but yeah, we're getting there in the end. But okay, the way I'm going to suggest playing now is I think that the move d3 is a very promising alternative for white. There are also some ideas with rook e1 that can also be considered. I think this might also give white a small edge. But d3 seems to be the modern trend at a high level. And there are a few ideas behind it, where basically the first point is if they play knight f6, you can kind of just go knight c3. And after e5, they don't have the usual response of knight d5 to activate their knight, meaning that the knight ends up a little bit more passive, and you do end up with a small advantage, thanks to your extra space and the double pawns after either, bishop e3, knight e4, rook e1, like all these moves are going to give white a little something here, where we can see how hard it is for black to find a good diagonal for his light squared bishop after our prophylactic h3. If they play a move like e5, like we saw in the earlier line, granted, we might not have the c3 d4 plan anymore, but we can still play the move bishop c6, and if dc6 a4, we can, just kind of play against the black pawn structure, just saying that, their structure is not very flexible in this instance. And if they play bc6, then yeah, maybe it's true that we would rather play c3, d4 in one go. But it's still going to be a good plan here, where after something like this, we get in d4 and our more flexible structure is going to give us a small advantage here. Something like takes even helps us to trade off their bishop pair and just put pressure against the d6 pawn, for example, where, as often happens in the Rossolimo, black's extra pawn, Alan, does come back to bite him a little bit as such. Of course, I realize black can play better than cd4, but yeah, it's not something where we're going to go super deep into at this point. The final point is if black does play a move like d6, just trying to keep the options open. I find that this idea of takes and e5 is quite a strong pawn sacrifice, where to talk the details is something I'm probably going to cover like in a video in Attacking the Sicilian exclusively for the students of that course. And if you do want to get that course and be able to see some of the updates I do for it this year, then yeah, I have put the checkout link down in the description below, where you can still get it at a discount rate before the course is sort of fully updated, as it were. But yeah, the point is that we basically are sacking a pawn, but it's also the pawn's a little bit weak, and if they do defend it, we can then kind of go after the c5 pawn and say that this is going to be a significant weakness. So it's quite a fresh idea that I think even for grandmasters is actually quite a tough one to deal with. But anyway, that's sort of sharing what I now consider the most promising path against g6. I like d3 best, but you could probably, in fairness, argue that rook e1 or even bishop c6 is probably objectively just as good. It's just kind of a matter of taste. I like the fact that d3 allows you to kind of avoid a lot of theory, but sort of get better versions of some of the other lines in many cases. Moving on to the lines with e6 in this version, there are a few different approaches that white can go for, where the one that I'm wanting to sort of play and what I'll be recommending in the Attacking the Sicilian update is the line of bishop takes c6 followed by d3. And the reason I'm recommending this approach is because Caruana actually won with 3 games in a row against Carlsen in this variation, to a point where Carlsen actually gave up this e6 system as a result. And the point is, if they go knight e7, the move of h4 is actually quite annoying. We just make it very hard for black to develop his knight. If black plays h5, we can then even go e5 and just really leverage the weakness of the black dark squares as such. While if they play a move like d6 trying to build up this center, then I found that the computers were really liking this plan of h5 and knight h4 and just sort of grabbing this space on the king side. It's maybe not the most natural line on the board, but I think that this approach is actually quite tough for black to deal with, where he sort of lacks the development to fully take advantage of it, and it's not so easy for him just to consolidate his strong dark squared center. And if they do play queen c7, Caruana tried a few different moves against Carlsen, but actually I really like the idea of e5 that my past chess trainer Ian Rogers played a nice game, and I will be showing that game in the update to the course, by the way. But that's what I'm going to be recommending. If you are wondering why I recommended previously in the course, I recommended this approach of d4 and kind of going for this open Sicilian, where the fact that the knight isn't on f6 pressuring the center means we can often end up getting a good sort of Marocci bind kind of structure. And I do think this is still going to be somewhat better for white, but yeah, I think it's also can be interesting to see some other ways the position can play for a little variety. I mean, to be fair, I think that Rookie 1 probably also gives white a small edge. But again, there's a lot of good lines you can play in the Rossolimo, and covering every single one of them would be a little bit impractical. So I've kind of gone for the ones where I sort of feel that they're sort of the most thematic approach possible, where it's kind of the easiest for you guys to sort of understand and execute, and that are perhaps least reliant on needing to memorize some deep theoretical variations. Like if there were a few moves of equal strength, in my opinion, I kind of went for the one that was a little bit less theoretical for you guys, but still which had some instructive model games I could share the insights of. Anyway, moving on to the lines with D6. I will say, to be fair, like with the D6 lines, there's sort of not any kind of massive updates in the sense. Like I'll share like some instructive examples, but I still think that the line I recommended before with like C3, Bishop F1, and going for D4 directly is just quite good for white. And I'm not going to give away everything that I shared in the course here, of course, but one point to kind of understand is that you're actually not really concerned about the doubled pawns around the king, because black just kind of lacks the development to really exploit them in a way. But there are also some fun ideas like this E6 pawn sack, which I do go into a bit deeper in the course, as it were. So I think you guys are going to really enjoy that. Now, against the move Knight F6, I believe that, and this is what Caruana played in the 2024 candidates, although it is true that he wasn't really getting such great positions out of the opening somehow. But I remember I recommended the move Knight C3 previously, and it still probably gives white a small advantage, but it does mean that black can play this move Knight D4, and this is sort of an approach that some players like Caruana and Carlsen played occasionally in the last years, when white is probably a little bit better here, but black does sort of get some fighting chances, as it were. So I'm going to be actually recommending the alternative approach of Bishop C6 and D3. And for this, I was really inspired actually by Vidit's game with white against Caruana in the FIDE candidates. Because even though that game ended a draw, Vidit just completely incomprehensibly outplayed his opponent, where after Bishop G4, he went H3, Bishop H5, and he played this move of Bishop to F4 in this version, sort of allowing black to undouble the pawns, but still he got a pretty good position out of the opening. In the course, I'm actually going to recommend a slightly different approach, where I kind of like starting with the move Knight C3, and then playing G4 and Bishop F4, just to kind of avoid some of those challenges with C4 that came up in the Vidit game, and just making it really hard for black to get in his desired E5 pawn structure. There was actually a game that Caruana played later in the tournament against Prague, where he played Queen C7. And in that game, Prague did get a small edge out of the opening, but Caruana sort of got in his E5 break and sort of outplayed Prague in the arising position. But what I found when looking at the database is that the move E5, just cutting across the plan, is just scoring ridiculously well for white. And even though maybe it's not the absolute top line from a computer point of view, I think you're going to have very, very good results with it. So it is something I will be covering in the update to this 2024 update to the Attacking the Sicilian course. It was already really, really good. Like, I was already very proud of it. Like, I even had a student of mine, a FIDE master, who told me that this was like his favorite course of mine because of how well I explained like all the model games and all the key ideas behind the moves, rather than just giving the theory. But yeah, I really believe that this update will really take it to the next level. And like, I'm not just sharing, like, it's not just like from a, let's say a business point of view, but I am really passionate about E4, and I'm kind of using this update as sort of a double up of kind of my own sort of chess training and study to, improve my own chess level. And I figured, why not share it with you guys as well. Now, in the lines where they play the move E5 in this case, after castle and bishop D6, an idea I kind of learned about after creating the course, is that actually the move C3, even though it's a little bit better for white, it's actually not the only move in this position that gives white some chances. I do recall that, the move D3 was played by Caruana against Abasov in FIDE candidates, but I did think that Abasov was fairly close to equalizing in that game, that white only got a very, very small advantage. Personally, I really like the idea of D4, where you just sacrifice the pawn on D4, and then just play normally, where you just use that lead in development and use the weakness of the of the d5 square to just have very, very nice compensation. I do think this is a very dangerous weapon, and it's sort of the line that really put me off playing the move e5 with the black pieces, quite frankly. So yeah, I think you guys are going to find that one really exciting to check out. And finally, I did also have a bit of a look at some model games after some of the alternatives, like Queen b6 and Knight a5 and this sort of thing. And I mean, these are sort of moves that, are not really going to be taken seriously in most theoretical resources. But I do realize that for a lot of you who are watching this training video, your opponents are not going to have really prepared for the move Bishop b5 at all. Like, they might have only really looked at the open Sicilian lines, because that's the sort of main line at lower levels. Like, at Grandmaster level, Bishop b5 is actually the main line. But yeah, the point remains, that it's good to be ready for some of the weird moves they can play as well that try to throw us out of our system. One small teaser I'll give you right now is that I found that in this particular line, after d4, take, and queen c7, there are actually some very beautiful ideas with the move queen to f3, where you just go bishop f4 and go for this big lead in development. Like, for example, you might be thinking they just go e5 and just, like, win a piece as such. But then we have some tricks like bringing the queen to c3 and just threatening knight c7. And you just get this completely crushing attack against the black king. Something like this, for example, would just be really beautiful. We just go e5 and you just basically crush the opponent in the style of Paul Morphy or Greco. It's one thing I've kind of found actually with analyzing with Injuns recently, and maybe this is a reflection of my own chess style as much as anything else, but I do believe that even in the modern chess era, it is still very much possible to play in the style of, of the romantic players like a Mikhail Tal or an Alexander Alekhine or a Garry Kasparov. To some of the top junior players like Abdusattorov and Gukesh, they are following this approach successfully in their own games. It just requires sometimes a little bit more creativity than was maybe the case in the pre-computer era. But yeah, having the engines around definitely helps with that. And yeah, if they go d6, you just castle and, g4, g5, rook e1, like, you'll often have sacks with knight f5 or knight 5 to rip open the e-file. So it's just a very beautiful attacking position that you get after some natural but not very great moves by black in the opening. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to share with this training. I'm going to share this one also in the course as well for the benefits of the students, because you have content just so many different places that sometimes it can be a bit hard for people to keep track of what I sort of put where, because sometimes I even lose track myself. But I think that with these lines you can sort of see that the position is just so much easier for white to play. I mean, I sort of mentioned it already in this training, but like, I basically stopped playing knight c6 as black because I tried literally everything you can think of against the Rossolimo, and whenever I tried, white was just getting a better position. It was really tough for me to play, and that's kind of what led me to start playing it as white, in about 2010 or 2011, and it actually became one of my most successful systems with the white pieces as such. And even today, I'm still pretty comfortable playing them, as it were. So I hope that you enjoyed the training, and do let me know in the comments, what was your favorite part of this training video, or what was sort of particular move or a particular insight that really made an impression on you. And if this training has whetted your appetite to not just sort of like dabble in the Rossolimo, or just like try it out, just one of many things you're trying, but if you're feeling okay, there's something I actually want to really understand at a deep level, to a point where you can even potentially outplay master level opposition just from understanding how the positions play out and having some slightly creative ideas that your average, let's say, opponents will not have faced before and will simply not be ready for, or even if they are ready for them, the position is still just much easier for you to play in the into the middle game as well. If that's something that does appeal to you, then I do recommend checking out the checkout link below, which will give you a chance to invest in the course and just take your understanding and your results against the Sicilian to the next level. And for those of you who are just happy to enjoy my free content and just getting value from that, to access more of that content, you can just go to my free Facebook group, Adult Chess Improvers. I put a link to that in the description below also, because there I do share a lot of puzzles, some different articles of mine, some different just like general advice as well. And it's something, so that whatever your situation, you can still, take some steps to improve your chess, as it were. So, whatever the case may be, I'll see you either, inside the course, inside the group, in the next training video. But yeah, whatever the case may be, take care.